So Brink's presentation at that time at NYU made an impression on me, and it helped me rethink Benedict Anderson's thesis in relation to Spanish American independence movements in the 19th century, which was very influential and had a lot of us thinking at the time, because although it was certainly true that Spanish America had a very old tradition in printing, and everybody always peacocks that when they're from Mexico or they're from Lima. We have the oldest printing presses in the continent. It's also true that the first newspapers began appearing about 20, 30 years prior to independence. So that much of Anderson's view held true, but it was no less the case that most of the ideas around independence had circulated actually through personal correspondence. And so in this kind of calligraphic mode that that Brink was writing about, and Brink's role in thinking through the problem of scripting, copying, notarial transcriptions, and religious and legal interpretation in statecraft, and in the forming of what in the old school they used to call sort of great and little traditions in relation to states, was really brightly illuminated for me for the first time. So Brink's work made an impression on me long before I actually had a chance to be his colleague and to know him more. I won't go into these kinds of details more because we're going to be hearing from Brink's former students and from his former colleagues through this event, and they know his work and its significance much more deeply than I do. In fact, this event was initiated and created by Brink's former students, current students, and by his closest colleagues. And I want to say, on a personal note, that I'm deeply not only grateful but also kind of moved by what this meeting has shown in terms of care for an esteemed and an admired colleague. Indeed, the person who's going to act as master of ceremonies in this in today's discussions and event is Fadi Bardawil, who is now an associate professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Duke, and I think is maybe currently still at Princeton, I'm not sure anymore, and a former student of Brink's. Before I turn the podium over to Fadi, who's a well-known and sort of much beloved person here in this department and university, I want to say two things about mechanics. One is that everyone who speaks will have to speak from where I am now, because it's thanks to this Zoom technology that Brink and the family members of his who weren't able to be present today can hear and see the proceedings. So there may be a little bit of awkwardness there. If you're speaking, don't take to strutting around and to wandering off in one direction or another, as many of you, I'm sure, are wont to do. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that after the event, the academic portion of the event concludes, there will be a reception with some really lovely Lebanese food down in the lounge of the anthropology department, to which you're all invited. So welcome again. Thank you to the organizers, and to thank Brink, of course, for everything that he does and has done. Welcome again, and with please.
Thank you, Claudio, for your opening words. Thank you to the department for hosting us. Thank you all for joining this afternoon, and for the multiple units on campus that made our gathering this afternoon possible. Before I start, I would like to indicate that our colleague Sima Golestani has prepared a photo book that we'd like everyone to sign and give to Brink. It has his photos of his rugs and his Yemen photos. So please make sure you do. For those of you, Sima, can you stand up for those who don't know you, maybe? So Sima's there with a photo book, and And make sure you sign it at one point or another. Throughout my time as a graduate student in this department from 2002 until 2010, or maybe I should say throughout our time together, Brink, you're always someone I thought of as la force tranquille, the sort of tranquil force that without much interference always exuded reassurance, conveying in a few words that we'll all be fine at the end, and then everything is going to be all right. But that force tranquille was not only a safeguard against the chaos of the world and the coldness of bureaucratic institutions, it also shook things up institutionally, and from it emerged new and much needed spaces for critical reflection on our present, such as the Center for Palestine Studies. As I address these words to you now, the mood and warmth of the atmosphere of a talk you gave at the American Anthropological Association a while ago come back to me. Quite a few of us who are here today were there then. It must have been the talk you gave after being awarded the Middle East Scholars Distinguished Award back in 2009. I'm pretty sure it was an early version of what will later be published under the title of yours that many of us gravitated towards. It must have been The Anthropologist as Reader, the title under which we, your student from the 90s until today, gather today to offer you, in gratitude, a few words. Your students will go in order of their graduation dates or enrollment ones for current students, and will briefly introduce themselves to our audience by mentioning their names, their graduation dates, and their current institutions, so that we sort of save up on time. So we'll start from Sitrag from the 1990s and Ann Arbor and go all the way to the present. But before I give the floor to your students, your longtime friends and colleagues from anthropology and MISAS, Professors Layla Abul-Lughod, Timothy Mitchell, and Mahmoud Mamdani, who need no introduction in this house, will say a few words. So I'd like to invite Layla to the podium.
I had nothing to do with the program, but I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be here and to be asked to say a few words. I was sort of asked as a representative of MISAS, and I'll say a word about that later on, but I felt it didn't make sense to talk institutionally about the department in which Brink played such an important role and continues to be such an important intellectual presence. We're here, of course, to celebrate Brink as a colleague, as a teacher, as a mentor to so many, not only to those of you assembled here who are going to speak as his former students, but also to those of us who are privileged to know Brink as a colleague, but also who learned from him. And what I do want to talk about, from his way of being a scholar. And perhaps it's above all Brink as a scholar that I think we're here to celebrate. As a scholar, in the way he will be known to people outside and beyond this room in enormous numbers, people who don't know him perhaps personally, of course, he stands as someone who has changed the way we understand the world of Islam, the Islamic legal tradition, and the forms of social life and moral being through which that tradition has been cultivated and lived and carried on. In those two remarkable books, The Calligraphic State and Sharia Scripts, remarkable for the way that they took and combined together his field work over great extended periods, and at the same time, his deep reading of texts and archives from what might have been thought of as a remote corner of the Islamic world, Highland Yemen, and produce out of that not one book, but two that give, interestingly, two such different readings of the power of that tradition in such different registers. I'm not going to talk more than that about the contributions of the books, all of which you know, and in many cases you will know better than me, but rather what the books themselves, I think, tell us about Brink as a person and a scholar. We're asked to speak for only 2 minutes each. Nobody mentioned that. You're going to find us very abrupt, but we were given 2 minutes, so I'm only going to make 2 points. First, Brink is a man of the library and the archive. An inescapable aspect, of course, of his work, and of course, in terms of that very distinction between the library and the archive around which he structured the second book, overcoming the age-old distinction between Islam as a fixed textual tradition and Islam as a lived discursive practice by exploring ethnographically and dynamically the relation between canonical texts and everyday reading and writing in a way that nobody else has done. But that sense of library and archive is, of course, our sense of Brink himself, not only of his scholarship. I actually reconnected with Brink a little over 2 decades ago, around 2001, 2002, when Lila and I moved uptown. She was working, had started working at Columbia. I was still based with my friends at NYU, some of whom are in the room today. I had no office up here, so I went every morning before heading downtown to sit and write in the reference room of Butler Library. And without fail, there every morning, I saw Brink. We would do our work, and then each knowing that the other was somewhere in the room, we would wander over and then get together after a couple of hours of work for coffee before he himself, of course, routinely headed off to the gym and then to his office to take care of all his other responsibilities. But there wasn't a day when he wasn't in the library working on his archive, on his laptop, at least in those days. That encounters in Butler took me back another 2 decades before that to around 1979-80, which is when I actually first met Brink, something like 45 years ago. I'd hoped to be able to claim, and maybe thought the reason I was going first is because I've known Brink longer than anyone else in the room, other than, of course, his brother Dart, who's with us online, and his son Tyler. But then Zach Lockman turned up, and I had to even give up that claim, who preceded me in Princeton and overlapped for longer and earlier than I did with Brink there. But my memory of Brink at Princeton was, again, the same memory entirely of the library, because it was there that I learned from Brink that simple love of exploring the stacks, precisely to pull from adjacent areas of the stacks, seemingly unrelated or only loosely related texts, and bring together works of history and works of theory, the primary and the secondary, and working out through those often almost haphazard connections, unexpected relationships and interrelationships. And that's something else that is both him as a person, but also exactly what one finds in his writing. The second thing is Brink as a scholar and a person of simultaneously great generosity and great humility. Others will talk, I'm sure, much more about these aspects, those who've worked with him closely over the years, how generous he has been in supporting their work, and equally, on a larger scale, in developing so many initiatives and programs here at Columbia that Lila and others will talk about. I particularly want to mention his role in MESAS, which, as many of you are centered in anthropology, you might not know how central a figure he's been to that department over the last 20 years. But also, of course, the Middle East Institute, that perhaps Catherine Poots will say something about later on, his work there, the Islamic Studies initiatives there, and long before that, the Islamic Studies workshops that Michael Gilson, who's also here, ran every year at NYU, that Brink was always a significant participant in. And even before that, and one of the places I met him in the gap between Princeton and Columbia, the Amherst Law and Society workshop that he was a key founding member of in the late 80s and in 90s. So again and again at all these different stages, he's been someone who has shared of his scholarship, his work, his support of other people. The point I'm making about this, and it'll be made, of course, by other people, is that generosity and that openness to others is not only here in the ways you encounter his work and his presence around the university and around the wider academic world, but it's also in his books. And it's an absolute hallmark of his writings. For better or for worse, I think we all reflect our qualities as a person in how we write and how we think. And rereading Brink's books over the last few days, as I was thinking what to say, I just realized that there's no one I know whose life has done that better. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Lila Balogad, and I'm in the anthropology department. And what?
I forgot to introduce myself.
Oh, yeah, but Fadi already introduced you. You said the faculty were going to speak first and Mahmoud after me. So anthropology and gender studies. And I wanted to take my 2 minutes, which I think I'll stick to, as Brink's long-term colleague, friend, and comrade, to thank him and talk, forgot to talk to the computer, and to talk about his extraordinary institutional legacy and his real legacy of the students who are here, who we'll hear from, but this is an important one for us. So following our prompt to say what Brink taught each of us, I would say that Brink taught me that individuals can transform their home in the university by building out from our scholarly passions and our political commitments to create institutional forums that bring together communities. And they can do this in a self-effacing way, quietly, calmly, selflessly, with steady vision and unbounded optimism, which is not a quality I share. So Brink shepherded the anthropology department, as you heard from Claudio, in my early years here, and he got us an endowment. And we were just mentioning Joyce Monges, who's still around apparently, and it was in her name. He directed the Middle East Institute for many years, probably several times, working closely with Astrid Benedict and colleagues. He took on a floundering Islamic studies MA program, and recognizing Catherine Spellman-Poot's incredible talents, worked with her to build a thriving program with Mahmoud Memdani. He ran the ongoing seminar series Ifriqiya, which I think Mahmoud will talk about. And later he founded the Sharia workshop, a serious seminar that brought together those working on Islamic law and some of the things that Tim mentioned. He wrote, I think, the first grant for the Center for the Study of Muslim Societies, realizing a long-time dream to bring together faculty and students from across Columbia, and worked with Manan and Marwa on that, and Catherine. But what's meant the most to me personally, and Brink, I'm addressing this to you, has been your constant comradeship around the question of Palestine. Brink didn't have to embrace this cause. He worked on, his scholarship was on Morocco, was on Yemen, but he did so with dedication and spirit. And in the early 2000s, some of you will remember, we were part of an informal cell we called the Faculty Committee on Palestine, the FCOPS. Edward Said was still alive, and we spearheaded with Brink as our WASP frontman or spokesperson, a campaign calling for divestment from companies that produce military equipment used by Israel against Palestinians. This was 22 years ago. Brink testified, I'll never forget, in front of the Committee on Responsible Investing, to the screams of rage by the then Hillel rabbi, who was later fired. We were shut down immediately. I'm sure you're not surprised. But then Brink again found legal loopholes in the faculty handbook and called, I recognize some of you who were at this meeting, called, it turns out you could, if you signed, 25 faculty signed a petition to have an emergency faculty meeting, they had to have it, so we did that. And, you know, the EVP, the administrators had to show up. But after that meeting, and I think it was with Gil Anajar, if I'm remembering correctly, we suddenly said, why are we always reacting against? Why are we always protesting whatever they've done? Why don't we turn it around and do something positive? why don't we create a Center for Palestine Studies? And so with his old connections, and I'll name names, with Nick Dirks, who was then EVP, he quietly got us the green light, believe it or not. And the only comment that Nick made at the time was that we were using the incorrect Columbia crown for our logo. And he and Rashid Khalidi were the first co-directors of the Center for Palestine Studies, and we have the current ones here now. So I learned from Brink how to work tirelessly for community, And I want to thank him, thank you, for coming to every talk and film screening and lecture, for introducing speakers by proudly saying that we were the only such academic center at a North American university. Berkeley just got one last week. And as someone who loved texts, it was not surprising, but kind of odd given his work, that he loved the play readings the best. Ismail came and gave things, and George Bajalia, who will speak, acted in some of those. And finally, on a maybe smaller note, but an important one, I wanted to thank you, Brink, for introducing us to Simone Rotkowitz, our treasured program manager at CPS. And thank you for never saying no, and for showing us all how much can be done if you're positive. You made Columbia a home to so many of us. Thank you.
Hello, Brink. I expect you are behind the screen and are able to see us and hear us. Well, my name is Mahmoud Mabdani. When I received the invitation for this program, I wanted to be one of the speakers. So I wrote to the organizers and I said, look, there's a gap here. Brink played a very important role in Ifriqiya, and I would like to say something about it. Very graciously, they accepted. And they said, you will have 2 minutes. So I noticed that everybody counts their 2 minutes, not from the time they start, but from the time they acknowledge that they have 2 minutes. So it's 2 minutes from now. Well, Brink worked on Middle East. I worked on Africa. And one day we had a discussion because I had taken this initiative called Ifriqiya. And I said to Brink, look, Brink, you should be part of broadening and expanding this initiative. You worked on Morocco, and Morocco is part of Africa. And the university, one of the universities in Morocco, has an institute on the study of Africa, and that institute looks southwards. It doesn't look to the Middle East. We had long discussions, several, and we agreed, yes, Africa is what appears on the map as the physical domain, Africa, and the debate about this has turned into, has become key to the politics of Africa. Two notions of what is Africa, one racialized notion, and the other notion of a Pan-African continental entity. And I said, let's work together and let's treat the Sahara as a bridge and not as a divide. Brink was convinced and Brink came in. I learned, it took me a couple of years to realize that Brink would pursue his convictions and would not really be bothered by whether I shared them or not. And that was much better for Ifriqiya. The first thing that Brink innovated was Ifriqiya began as a faculty colloquium. And then Brink said to me after 1 year, he said, you know, Mahmoud, this is not good. We don't have to be gatekeepers or just the faculty who call themselves Africa faculty, just as you convinced me that I didn't have to be an Africanist, but still could work on Africa. We'll open this up to graduate students. And we opened it up to graduate students, and for much better. Brink played a role both institutionally and intellectually. Intellectually, we began two research networks, one on slavery or captivity. At the time, we didn't call it captivity, slavery then in Africa. And basically, our target was the North American scholarship on slavery, which understood captivity around the world through the lenses of Atlantic slavery. And everything was either almost slavery, near slavery, just getting there, whatever. And we shared doubts about whether this was the way to understand what had been going on in the pre-modern world, in a sense. And the second one was on the Indian Ocean and Indian Ocean studies. And we also had a shared understanding that this habit of just sticking to land masses was not a very productive one, and we should look at oceans as also uniting different places at the ends of the oceans. And we began a research network, benefited from some Columbia money and everything, and research network lasted for many years. I look at the photograph of Brink here, starting with lots of hair, and then hair recedes, and then the color of hair begins to change. And I realized that Brink gave us his best years. He really did. And while he cycled his way through it, while he ran his way through it, and while he urged me almost every week to go with him to Queens to have fish. I didn't realize I would.
I've been listening to Brink's thing.
Me too.
Brink is talking, but in a different voice. It's somebody else. Well, Brink, this will be an ongoing conversation, a long conversation, which really deserves more than 2 minutes. But there are many people to speak here, so I'm not complaining about the 2 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Tim, Layla, and Mahmoud for sticking to the very creative 2 minutes. Now we move, and thank you as well for the personal, political, intellectual, and institutional dimensions of Brink's multifaceted life and work that you've put forward. I would like now for us to move to the sort of centerpiece of the program, which is Brink's students, which are more than 30 years of teaching, mentorship, advising, intellectual dialogue, and friendship. We will start with Setrag Manukyan, who was Brink's student in Michigan Ann Arbor, and move our way to the sort of current students at Columbia University. So Setrag, please start us.
Hi, Brink. I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me. Hello, everyone. I'm Setrag Manukyan. But I hope to channel here the many different voices of other students of Brink at Michigan. LSA building, State Street in Ann Arbor, Michigan, 3rd floor. We were all there to learn from you, Brink. Anthropology, history, law. That was the class that transformed us. That was the class where we learned from you, who were developing something we felt it was new, it was unique. Of course, it was transformations were in the air, in the anthropological history here. But you were doing it, you had your own take, you were doing it in a particular way, and we all felt that. Some of us were calling you Sheikh. I don't know if you like that. And we were asking fatwas from you, fatwas, existential fatwas sometimes. I think we learned all to combine ethnography, deep ethnography, with textual analysis, and become, or hope to become, or we're trying to become, anthropologists as readers. And with rigor, attention to detail, you always recommended, but also you invited us to use our imagination and be creative. To quote or paraphrase Borges, the Argentinian poet, you taught us, or we learned, how to be anthropologists who would be proud of the books they read, proud of the Arabic, books in Arabic, books in Persian, books in other languages. And this, as some of you know, it's not what usually anthropologists might be proud of. So I think this is what somehow felt was making us distinctive. If I have to tell you more personally, I should name students from Michigan. Some of them are in the room: Moni Limbert, Ilana Feldman, Brian Mooney, I hope is here, Anupama Rao, and those who couldn't make it, Lucine Taminian, Flag Miller, Penelope Papalias, Morgan Liu, Oren Kozansky, Michael Fahey, and others. So we're many. If I have to speak on behalf of myself, it's hard because you taught me everything. It's just hard to say one thing that I learned from you. But I think what I learned is I learned to learn. I learned to learn how to understand what I wanted to do, even if I didn't know what that was, to develop with patience and work to develop my vision. And this is a beautiful gift. Thank you.
That's a hard set of acts to follow. I am Navida Khan. I graduated 2003 from Columbia, so I wasn't unfortunately part of this wonderful cohort that I've heard so much about, people who've gone on to write wonderful books that have been meaningful to me. But I belong to another cohort, and hopefully we have also been able to contribute to his legacy. I actually stopped reading my emails at some point when the decision was that we only. Okay. I don't know if I should interfere. Yes, I think somebody may have their audio on, if you don't mind shutting it. So as I was saying, I stopped reading my emails at some point, unfortunately, being a derelict at that. And at that point, the call was that we should only speak for a minute. So being a good student, I actually wrote a minute-long speech and I practiced it, and it's only 10 seconds above a minute. So starting from when I say I'm starting. So and also I was told to address the screen and to hold it together. Okay. Hi, Brinkley. You've given me so much intellectual guidance and inspiration my entire life as a scholar. Sorry, that is hard for me to pluck a moment to speak about, but here is one. that really opened my heart to everything around me while doing field work in Pakistan way back when. Sorry, I'm so happy to be here. These are really tears of happiness. I remember writing you long, pained emails complaining about how everyone fights all the time about mosques, yet so far I hadn't found anyone to talk to me about waqfs, the thing that you had so patiently taught me about, the legal form that makes a mosque in perpetuity. You wrote me back to say, stay calm, be in the moment, try to understand their fights, however uncomfortable they may be, because they're saying important things, and to be sensitively inquiring about what those things are. However, you added, pay attention to how people are saying them, right? So don't pay so much attention to what they're saying, but how they're saying it. And then you said, a waqf doesn't just make the ground on which the mosque is built sacred, it creates columns of sacredness to the skies. So see who is open to the power of the waqf. This prompt had me looking to the skies more often and listening to the words and sentences and sounds. I don't know, I think that you may have taught me what is enchantment in a very small legal form. I look forward to shooting the breeze with you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Amir Mittermeier. I graduated from this department in 2006, and I'm now at the University of Toronto. I learned so many things from Brink, including, I hope, how to be a patient supervisor, where to buy rugs in Cairo and good coffee here on campus, and how to stand up for what's right despite the backlash. I wish I had time to talk about all these things and about Brink's care as supervisor. He was and is a true Dr. Vater to me, a doctoral father, which is what we call PhD supervisors in German. But given the time constraints, I will talk only about one specific thing I learned from Brink, and that is maybe unsurprisingly reading. By reading, I mean multiple things. First, reading ethnographies. In 1996-97, I spent a year at the University of Michigan as an exchange student. I had escaped the world of Orientalism in Germany, where I had studied Islamic studies, and I took my first ever anthropology class in Michigan. It was called Peoples and Cultures of the Middle East and North Africa, and it was taught by Brink. He made us read 6 or 7 full-length ethnographies in that course, among them Lila's Wild Sentiments, Ted Swedenborg's Memories of Revolt, Smada-Levy's Poetics of Military Occupation, and Brink's own calligraphic state, which had just come out in paperback that year. These books blew my mind, and about halfway through the term, I knocked on Brink's door to ask if he could help me figure out how to apply to grad programs in anthropology. I'm still deeply grateful for the time and encouragement he gave me back then, especially given that I was a student from abroad and had no clue about how and where to apply to grad programs in the United States. I had never even heard of GRE tests at that point. My desire to stay in North America and study anthropology came entirely from reading those ethnographies and reading them with Brink. Today, as a professor, I try to introduce my undergraduates in Toronto to the pleasures and challenges of reading full-length ethnographies, and it's not always easy to convince them to read that many pages, but I keep remembering Brink's class and what those books did for me. I was lucky that I ended up as a grad student at Columbia, where Brink became my Dr. Vater. And that's where he taught me to read all over again. He taught me how to read theory, how to read in different languages and draw these readings together, and how to weave together textual and ethnographic research. During my coursework, Brink supported me in taking whatever courses I wanted, but he was maybe most excited when I asked him one year what he thought about me commuting out to Princeton once a week to take a course with Michael Cook, a scholar of Islamic history who teaches grad students to find their way around Arabic primary sources. Cook would give us a snippet from an Arabic biographical dictionary and make it our homework to figure out who a particular Ahmed ibn Muhammad mentioned in that snippet was. The course was a killer, but I learned a lot. During my fieldwork, I would discuss the classical dream manual of the 8th century scholar Ibn Sirin with Sheikh Nabil, an interlocutor of mine who was the guardian of Ibn Sirin's shrine and himself a dream interpreter. Sometimes I brought copied pages out to the shrine so we could go through them together. My most humbling and memorable Brink moment in the field was when Sheikh Nabil instructed me to copy his own little dream booklet on dreams and dream interpretation by hand, the logic being that I would only truly understand the words if I went through the work of copying them. Writing, reading, and understanding are all entangled here. I did as I was told, and I remembered Brink throughout all those hours of writing, recalling also the Yemeni scholars he's written about who made a personal practice of copying books by hand, sometimes adding commentary or poetry while doing so. Brink is with me every day I read, write, and teach, and I'm deeply grateful for all he has done for me and an entire generation of Middle East anthropologists who are now my friends and my colleagues. And I'm so glad we could all come together today to celebrate Brink and your work. Thank you.
Hello, Brink. It's Emilio Spadola. I hope you can hear me. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be here in your honor, to be here with all the community that you've created. When I came to Columbia, I had very little idea of what I would study. I had majored in anthropology and literature and mostly just Foucault as an undergrad. And queer theory was my specialty. So of course you thought it was a fine idea for me to start learning Arabic and become a specialist of the Middle East and Islam. At least you trusted me and encouraged me when I said that I thought that was the best place, the best direction for me to take. I am forever grateful to you for having made possible a semester of fieldwork in Morocco in my second year, rather than study here at Columbia and take much needed coursework. You saw the necessity for me to also spend time in Morocco to soak up, well, the culture, the smells, scents, sounds, everything about where I would make really not just the next steps of my career, but make the rest of my life. Without your intervention, without your trust, I would not have perhaps a most precious and meaningful set of relationships, a part of my life that I could never have imagined and now can't imagine living without. I will share one thought or one, hopefully a moment you remember, although I'm sure you had many of these moments with students. I learned from you how to write a grant proposal, and you taught me in a way that strikes me as very very appropriate to your interest in the materiality of writing. I came with a hard copy of a grant, and you said, you took a look at it, you breezed through it, and you said, walked over to your desk, picked up a pair of scissors, and began cutting every page, sometimes just a sentence or two, sometimes half the page. And you began rearranging on the floor in a long line each part of what I had written, but completely, in a totally different order. And I thank you. I received the grant. I continued to use that model to write more grants. And I just am grateful. I love you, Brink. I miss you. I look forward to talking with you soon. And Allah yubarak feek. God bless you. Talk to you soon.
Hi, Brink. I wrote out my comments by hand. I hope you appreciate that. Um, Dear Brink, hi, I'm Anand Taneja. I graduated from Columbia in 2013. Brink was on my committee. I now teach at Vanderbilt University. Dear Brink, you've probably been thanked in hundreds of book acknowledgements. I know you were thanked in mine. Brinkley Messick, with his kind and rigorous mentorship, made sure that I became an anthropologist of Islam as well as an anthropologist of South Asia. And I know that the centrality of poetry in my work is because of your example, taking textual tradition seriously. But as I address you today, it is with the realization of how inadequate that acknowledgement is. And I want to say a little bit about your example and what your kindness meant to me. When I remember you, I remember my first years in graduate school, pre-ABD, and being in your office on the 8th floor of Schermerhorn. We would sit on the couches and talk unhurriedly. You would listen, calmly, patiently, with an occasional comment. The generosity of that unhurriedness is something I've only come to appreciate in retrospect. You were the chair of the anthropology department. You were busy with the Center for Palestine Studies and the Middle East Institute. You were writing Sharia scripts. You had a family. And yet you made a pre-ABD graduate student feel like there was nothing more important going on than the conversation we were having. वक्त की कैद में जिंदगी है मगर चंद घड़ियां यही हैं जो आज़ाद हैं. Life is in the prison of time, and these few moments are the ones that are free. That's what my memory of being in your office many times feels like. Time is a potent currency in academia, jealously hoarded and guarded. Its expenditure not spent writing, bemoaned with the wailing and gnashing of teeth. And yet you gave of it so generously to your students with such gentleness of spirit. It is an example that I can only hope to live up to. And I hope to see you soon in person, inshallah, to continue where we left off in an unhurried conversation. जी ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन बैठे रहें तसव्वुर जाना किए हुए. The heart searches for those nights and days of leisure again, where we keep sitting together, contemplating the beloved. Thank you for everything.
Well, there, I'm already crying. Okay. Hi, Brink. I hope you can see and hear me. So I'm going to cheat and say two things that Brink taught me. Also, I'm Simon Golastane. I graduated from Columbia in 2014. I'm at Cornell now. So two things. Number one, on the first day of our PhD orientation, we met with Brink and Nadia, who were chair in DGS at the time, to talk about the program. So we listened, all very eager and earnest. We listened to the sage intellectual guidance until at the end of the meeting, Brink said something I'll never forget. Brink, you said, eat whole wheat and don't forget to exercise. And as you said it with your usual gentle solemnity, I didn't know exactly what to make of this. But years later, I came to understand. What you meant was that you are a whole person. This is a job, and remember to take care of yourselves. In some ways, it's the best advice you can give to anxious new graduate students, and it's something I now try to impart to my own students. Okay, number two, I also listened to the 2 minutes, also a good student. Okay, number two, Brink taught me the joy of reading and thinking ethnographically, that everything is worth investigating, or as Anne Lamont has said, that quote, there's ecstasy in paying attention. And I came from Campolet was my background. I'd read a lot of Deleuze. I kind of knew Anthro was the way to go. And so when I came to Brink and said, yeah, Islam, he did not shy away from me, who had no training outside of, Sunday school classes I took in a cafeteria on Long Island growing up. So totally raw to the field. And he was so generous and so patient, and also guided me to texts he thought that would be, in my sort of field. But this joy of ethnography, you taught me to listen and to look, to remember to think slowly, to look closely at the text, and that the meaning of the text is not just in the content, but in the layout, the ink color, the paper texture, the watermark. It goes on. It's truly endless, and that's the joy of it. Your enthusiasm for the raw data of my ethnographic work with Sufi communities in Iran, or cell phone Sufis, as you call them, was so infectious that I never once left your office hours without being re-energized about my project, even within the deepest doldrums of dissertation writing. Your enthusiasm also gave me the confidence that I very much lacked at the time and so desperately needed. Thank you, Brink, for being my teacher. You're with me every day in the classroom. I've been writing. I'm always grateful.
Hi, Brink. My name's Sophia Stamatopoulou Robbins, and I don't need to read this. I graduated, got my PhD in 2015, and now I'm at Bard College. So the words that come to mind when I think about Brink are forbearance, wisdom, and humor. I first got to know Brink when he taught my senior thesis seminar when I was an anthropology major here at Columbia. He soon found himself writing letters for me as I tried to get a fellowship at a UK institution, which he was quick to tell me was a way backward institution to go to. I won't tell you which one it was. And he was one of the first people to make me feel welcome when I returned to Columbia for a PhD. For anthro graduate students, Brink was the person who rerouted conversations about method into questions about what objects and texts, always also texts, we would bring back in our suitcases. He was the kind of person who could see good things about old German Orientalists while also being a critical supportive presence for Palestine organizing on campus. When we had a teach-in about Gaza in 2009, he gave an accountant-style analysis comparing the defense work at Tel Aviv and Columbia universities. He hosted meetings in his office for students organizing around Palestine and Iraq, and he made it possible for us to store tens of cardboard coffins that we got from Code Pink here in Skirmahorn for direct actions we were planning. He encouraged me to read syllabi being taught in environmental engineering departments in Gaza's universities as what I think he hoped would be a gateway to me studying texts, Islamic texts in Gaza. But he pivoted seamlessly when I expressed my preference for helping families mop their floors in the West Bank. This was him supporting me, declaring my desire to follow the thing, following Latour into Palestine's garbage, even though he saw little merit in thing following and had no interest in trash. He looked the other way when I just couldn't seem to make it on time to his 9 a.m. class, and he said things like, "You go, girl," in response to my emails from Palestine, and let me know when my volume was too low at conferences. He showed up with Zach Lockman, who's here, to the random hotel suite at the Vancouver AAA's, where I had my book party a few years ago. And most recently, he seemed to be genuinely delighted to see pictures of my daughter. And when I saw him earlier this fall in Connecticut, where he now lives, it was the same Brink I've known for 2 decades, who made jokes about the people in the old photos on his table. I won't tell you who the people were, and who offered to share a cookie with me in his garden. Brink is the kind of person, as everyone has said here, who really sticks with you, and I'm very grateful for that. Thanks a lot.
Hi, everyone. I'm George Bajalia. I finished here in 2021 in the anthropology department. And hi, Brink. I want to just share quickly a couple of things that I've learned from you, Brink. And they start really right at the beginning when I first started here in 2014 and really had no background in anthropology and no idea what I was doing. And Brink, you made me feel like I could do this. But you also helped me to reconcile what felt like 2 separate things in my life. One was a background in theater, as Lila mentioned, which is what I was doing before I started this. And the other was this interest in anthropology and in Morocco, where I had been working previously. And of course, immediately we started talking about theater. And by that spring, you had convinced me to act in a series of plays that the Center for Palestine Studies was doing. And that relationship continued up until shortly after I finished in 2021, and we did the Le Meccan No Place radio series. And for a long time, I was worried that people would think that, oh, he obviously works on theater in Morocco, which is not what I work on. I work on migration and borders. And I was hesitant to let these two sides of my life come together, but you convinced me that it was okay to do so. I remember when we were looking for a location to do the spring 2015 iteration of the Center for Palestine Studies stages, and we were wandering around campus, and we ducked into a building, and you said, do you want to see the classroom where they filmed Ghostbusters? And I said, yeah, of course. And so you took me to that classroom. And then you said that the reason why Columbia's grounds are always under maintenance is because the groundskeeping union negotiated a contract with Ghostbusters and received royalties from Ghostbusters so that they were constantly being paid to do maintenance around campus. And I don't remember if I'm getting that story totally right or not, but I remember, you know, first year starting the PhD, and I was like, wow, you know, this is important knowledge that I've just learned about this institution. Fast forward a little bit, and I think I came to you with a stack of documents related to my family's land claims in Palestine, and you tried to convince me that that should be the subject of my PhD. And it wasn't, but I want to tell you that I'm finally pivoting to starting to actually work on that and write about that. So I look forward to talking to you about it really soon. And I guess the final thing that I want to share that I've learned from you, Brink, is something that relates to what we see in that photo right there, which is I'm very grateful to learn and to hold dear that you can never have too many Moroccan rugs. And so I look forward to coming back from Morocco with even more and showing them to you. Thank you.
Salam, everyone, especially Professor Messick. So my name is Shabir Agha Abbas, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Arizona and was a student of Professor Messick's in the Islamic Studies Master's Program. So I think I'm the only non-professor here. So I'm a fish out of water. And I also forgot to drink water today. So one thing I learned from Professor Messick is to never ignore the mundane as something unimportant. To the unperceiving eye, the handwritten minutes of a Sharia court in Island, Yemen are just that, mundane legal documents, scraps of paper comprising of leases and dispute resolutions. But for the perceiving eye, they demonstrate the vertical integration of the Sharia. This is the profound way of looking at things that Professor Messick taught his students. He taught us how to find the buried treasure hiding within the ordinary. I first met Professor Messick in 2018 when he and his team at the Middle East Institute, Professor Poots, Astrid, and others were attempting to rejuvenate the Islamic Studies program, and what a success it has been. As a student, I have experienced time at 4 different universities, and the level of care and dedication Professor Messick and those under his leadership gave to our students is simply unmatched, something truly rare from an institutional standpoint. In the Islamic tradition, we are taught that our teachers are no less than our parents, that al-muallim huwa al-ab ar-ruhi li-tullab. And this is reflected in the great effort he put in our academic upbringing, guiding us to our individual successes. So on behalf of the Islamic Studies cohort of 2020 and 2021, my classmates, I would just like to express how immensely grateful we are to Professor Messick for all he has done, and we would like to wish him the best of health, and we would like to congratulate him for his legendary career. Thank you.
George took my Ghostbusters jokes. I don't know what I'm going to say now. Sorry, Brink. Yeah, you tell this story to all the students. So, my name is Safi Shamaoun. I'm a current PhD student in Anthropology department, and I'm very, very honored and happy to be here. Dear Brink, I'm here as I would love to reveal another side of your life at Columbia. That is your morning gym sessions at Dodge. I wasn't at all surprised with how committed you were to these sessions. Yet what did surprise me, however, that you were lifting more weight in your shoulder presses than I was. You worked out at a pro, stretching, lifting, and then doing cardio. And I have to say that I got a bit competitive. I never needed an appointment with you. At the corner between Avery and Skerman I just knew that I would bump into you. And in just 10 minutes, we talked about everything. From how events were unfolding in Syria, to electronic music, the history of anthropology, events at the Middle East Institute and or the Center of Palestine Studies, your favorite sushi spot on campus, new texts on Sharia law, and whether it's cool these days to roll up one's denim pants. Of course, there's no link between the last two. Yet our conversations were never complete unless they somehow ended with Yemen and the court cases there. Walk the streets of Aleppo was your first reaction when I told you that I was planning to apply for a PhD in anthropology. Scripts and texts are central to the anthropology to which you're committed. Yet walks seem to have a very special place in the anthropology that you have lived in your everyday life. I truly enjoyed our short and aimless walks, where you would tell me what Ghostbusters, tell me a piece of history about Colombia, and suggest a new food spot that I should try. Photos also seemed central to this anthropology, as we see in a lot of the photos, especially in the classes you have taught. When I TA'd your Arabia Imagine class, the students and I would just wait for the moment when you'd pull up your fieldwork photos. We truly cherish the Morocco ones. But I particularly love that photo of you and Professor Lockman in the old souks of Aleppo. I'm here to tell you that I might actually be able to walk the streets of Aleppo very soon, as you have asked me, an act that I thought I would never perform again. I vividly remember the first time I met you in 2014 when I came here from undergrad. You were genuinely curious to hear what was happening in Syria, and I'm deeply grateful for how you encouraged and supported me to talk publicly for the first time about Syria, to organize talks, panels, and events to the Middle East Institute. Brink, thank you for the walks, the talks, and for listening when I found it very hard to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Setrag, Navida, Amira, Emilio, Anand, Sima, Sophia, George, Jabir, and Safi, who touched on the, again, multiple facets of sort of brings his character, personality, and the richness of his soul. Something Anand said sort of resonated deeply with me. I was always late to Brinks' office hours. And every time I would show up and say, I'm sorry, I'm late. And he would say, who's counting minutes? But I was told I have to count minutes for this event. That said, we still have quite a few minutes before we give the floor to our closing remarks by Bridget Seeley Messick. So I would like to invite those of you who are not on the program and who would like to spontaneously say a few words, whether colleagues, former students, anyone who would like to say a few words. Shahla, you have to speak to the camera. We do have a few minutes, so if there's more people who would like to say something, please don't hesitate to.
Okay. Hi, Brink. I hope you're there and you see me, and I haven't been able to come to see you, but yes, and I'm Shahla Talebi, and I was a student of Brink from 2000 to 2007. And so just very briefly, because I wasn't prepared, I wasn't supposed to give a talk, but just very briefly, in a way, it's like amazing how all of us are saying almost the same thing. But one of the things that when I came to academia, I was very naive. I was like, I'm not going to go to the corporation. I can't deal with the corporation. I'm going to go to academia because everyone is about like learning and living what one learns. And I realized it wasn't as much. And one of the things that I really, really appreciate about you, Brink, is the fact that you were so unpretentious. You really did not follow the rules of capitalism and the production that had to really go really fast, and you had to show up how much you produce, rather to really deeply engage with what you're reading, what you're learning, what you're seeing, what you're observing. The love that you had for your fieldwork, with the people, for the mountains, for everything. The fact that I don't know if you remember, when I was writing a paper for your class, and I was writing about leathers. And so when I wrote 72 pages. And I wrote to you and said, I know it's too long. I can cut it very short. And you said, no, you wanted to read 72 pages. And after you read, I never forget that I asked me to bring the letters, and I brought you the letters, and you're looking at it, and you were looking at the tiniest thing in that letter, the way it had been folded. And it just kept me thinking how much everything, even if they appear mundane, they actually matter. And the way you would not really make noises about Palestine, about war on Iraq, but in about divestment, but in every single case, you were there. And you were very, very significantly there. So I remember once in one of those faculty meetings, I said, we constantly read about power and hegemony. When it comes to really living and really speaking, against that, few of us actually really live that in our everyday life. And that was something that I really learned, that what you were saying, you were actually living. And the reading, one of the things that I had learned at Columbia was that the first thing you do, you learn how to criticize. It was completely the other way with you. That's something I have followed since. That for you first, regardless of how bad something that we were reading may be, you first read for what good it was that we could learn from it. And that the really engaging with something for the positive is something that I still keep really so dear to myself. So I just want to say the last thing, Sima, when you were saying that he told you what he told you, I went to your office, I don't know if you remember, Brink, and I said, I was so anxious. Who's going to give me a job at my age? Who's going to do this? I have accent and this and that. And you said, go shopping, Shahla. It was like the least of interesting thing for me. It was like, shopping? I never go shopping. But later when I thought about it, I still do the same thing with my students. To remind them that the anxiety at the moment doesn't really mean anything. Just take care of yourself. Do something that calms you, down, and then you really pay attention to the real issues. So that was also when every single time you came and saw me at the gym, Shahla, don't do more than 45 minutes. Anyways, thank you, Brink. You've taught me so much. And most important thing is the sincerity and the unpretentious character that you were as a great scholar that you never, ever even assumed to be. Thank you.
Hi, Brink. I don't think I have anything actually very different to say than what people have said, but I just want to amplify some of the things that have been central to me amongst this range of things that people have described about what you, Brink, have brought to us. And I think for me, in some sense, the primary thing is that the work is at the center. In a field that we're in that is so often driven by egos and performance and worrying about who's where and all the, all the stuff. The message from Brink, not just the message, not just what you were saying, but how you went about your work and your engagement with us was put the work at the center and everything else will follow. And I've tried to follow that in my own work, but also when I advise students, I think about like that, again, someone described it, I was just at a talk and somebody said, we share a Brinkist. And I do think about that like message of how to be an advisor. And then the other thing, a memory that I always have, and this is back to our Michigan days, was at a works in progress. I don't know if Setrek and Mani, you remember this, but the faculty would give a kind of works in progress about things they were working on. And Brink, you gave one and you brought your documents to this and you sat at the table and you touched your documents the entire time. And while it was funny, it was also the heart of the matter. And I think one way or another, the rest of us, your students, we spend the rest of our career touching our documents and trying to bring that to other people. So thank you. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you and to be here with you. And I wish you well.
Hey, Brink. Hello, all of you. I hadn't planned or expected to say anything. It's been lovely to hear from Brink students and hear the common themes in your speaking about what you learned from Brink. So as Tim mentioned, I've probably known Brink longer than anyone else in the room. I met Brink when I was not yet 20 years old. He was a few years older. I was an undergraduate at Princeton. I transferred in, which was good because I got to spend less time at that very conservative, very repressive, very sexist institution. I was an undergraduate major in Near Eastern Studies. This was before Bernard Lewis came, but it was still the, shall we say, a bastion of old-fashioned thinking at that stage. Brink was a graduate student, a couple of years older than I was. And what I remember from Brink, and you can see it, I think, in that first picture there on the left, he was very cool, right? The young Brink. He was very alienated from his cohort of graduate students, whom he found rather, I'm not sure how to characterize this, stuffy, oppressive, not a happy atmosphere. So he took refuge with a group of undergraduates who he found more fun to be with and more pleasant. I don't remember too much from that period. We spent a lot of time high, so some of the memories are gone, I'm afraid. But I will mention two journeys I went on with Brink that were important for me in my life. One was somewhere in those very early years. We drove out to visit his family in Dayton, Ohio for Thanksgiving. So for me, this was definitely an ethnographic experience. It was maybe my first exposure to Midwestern middle class or upper middle class WASP life, complete with the cocktails and the mock Tudor house and various other things in this very nice suburban neighborhood. And it was a road trip, so it was very meaningful to me. Another journey I took was to visit Brink in Ib when he was doing his research there. He had just had his first child as a little baby. You know, I'm sure all of you have seen his photographs of Ib, and it brings back memories for me. It's obviously extremely important, Brink, hi, to you, and remains that way. It came as no surprise to Brink when I told him a couple of months ago, I just moved to the Upper West Side from faculty housing at NYU about a year ago, and walked into a local hardware store. And I heard that the people working there were speaking Arabic. I asked them where they're from. Of course, they're from Ib. And it turns out that a lot of the hardware stores in Manhattan are owned, run by people from Ib. Right? I mentioned this to Brink, and he said, well, of course. Right? He knew this. So it was a revelation for me, but not for him. So I won't go on for too long. I'll just conclude by saying that you know, the work fades, not my work, I mean, not his work, but the work of all of us ultimately. I don't know what legacy my own work will leave behind, but my claim to fame, I suspect, will be that I have known, perhaps alone among, well, certainly among the crowd here, all three of Brink's wives. So I feel that as a distinction, and it's a sign of our long connection, and one which I've cherished, and even though I was never a student, I've learned a lot from him. But again, not just in a scholarly way, not in terms of how to do scholarly work, but in terms of attitude. And I've tried, I'm sure I failed, but I've tried to emulate that calm and that sense of cool, which I associate with Brink going way back. So Brink, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I wish you the best.
So I'm not prepared also. My name is Sonia Ehsan Tirmizi. I was a student of Brinkley Messick, graduated in 2015. And it's hard for me to hold it together too, because Brink gave me a home in the anthropology department when nobody really cared about Afghanistan, which I've worked on. But I still remember I took one of the first class of anthropology with Brink, and I went in and I said, I want to work on Afghanistan, and where should I find a home? And he said, it's good to be adopted by Middle East Studies, because I was vacillating between Middle East Studies and South Asia. And he said, we'll give you a home, we'll adopt you. So thank you, Brink, for adopting
Afghanistan and for for giving Afghanistan studies a home in Middle Eastern studies. And he helped me get all of my grants. I remember when the first grant that I was writing, I didn't get it the first time. And he said, come over to this classroom in Shermerhan. And when I went in, he had made a big diagram on the board with so much detail about how a reviewer is thinking. And of course, I got the grant the next time. Thank you, Brink, for that too. And finally, thank you, Brink, for asking Laila Bulakhud to read my book proposal and my book. And Laila kindly did, which was because of Brink. And yes, the book did really well. So thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Brink. I'm Gil Anijar. I wanted just to say that one of the things I learned from Brink, which has kind of been said, but the sharpness of it was quite striking. For Brink, there were only two kinds of events. There were either victories or good signs. And having been at Columbia as an assistant professor and then going through the ropes, the hierarchy at Columbia being what it is, in retrospect, I think that one of the good things I can say about this, there's really not very many good things I can say about Columbia, with all due respect, yes. But one of the things that I can say is that one is given opportunities to see models. And I don't know that we do that too much. Yes, it's a kind of Marcus Aurelius moment to choose oneself a model. And I don't think at first, in the first years that I was here, there was any particular reason to have very many conversations with Brink, but I don't remember the first, I don't remember the second, I just remember that there were lots of them. And over the years, the sense that Brink was really the model to follow, which, just to be clear, I didn't follow at all. But I did know that if there was a model to follow, that was certainly him. And I will say that, thank you, Leila, for mentioning those early moments where we were not the original conspiracy theorists, but there were many moments when it felt, particularly again as an assistant professor, that I was part of the first conspiracy practitioner, and Brink was an excellent conspirationist. And for this, among many other things, I also want to say thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Brink. It's Ellen Marakowitz. Many of you probably don't know me. I am the director of the master's program in our department, Anthropology, of which I got my PhD from our department. Then I've been there for, I like to say 1800. But in any event, when Brink was chair, he was instrumental, for example, in thinking a lot about the master's program. He was really helpful. That's why we have an MAO postdoc position for the program. And as the director of the master's program, I've always, those of you here who may have gone through the master's program know that one of my goals has always been to be as present for the MA students as possible, to work with them, and also to get other faculty to work with them. And Brink really, really came through with flying colors. Brink, you did so much for the MA students, and you really, you have really been not only patient with them, but worked so seriously with them. And I'm really happy to say, many of them went on to wonderful doctorate programs. So I didn't want anyone not to say this about you, because it's probably not that known. And also, Brink, over the years, you have done some personal kindnesses for me. I'm not going to go into them, but really very generous. And 2 years ago, we became corner office mates on the 8th floor, right across from each other. So that's been very nice. So I thank you so much, and just wanted to let people know that you did that for many students.
Hey, Brink, it's Rashid. How you doing? I wasn't going to say anything, but something Gil just said impelled me to say this. Nobody who looked at Brink or who saw Brink in operation would ever have guessed this. I mean, as was said a minute ago by Zach, he was cool. He had so many interests. He was so low key. He was so humble. He was a brilliant strategist. I thought of myself as political. I thought I knew how to, I knew the ropes. I knew how to do things. We all learned so much from Brink in that incredibly quiet way, how to work your way through an evil labyrinth like the Columbia bureaucracy. He understood how to do it in the quietest, most effective, most pragmatic, most devastating way. I mean, the things that were done at Columbia, many of you mentioned things in anthropology. I'm not aware of any of them. I'm sure that everything you said is true. And I would guess that a lot of that has to do with his astuteness, his political astuteness, his shrewdness. And under that quiet, calm, unassuming exterior, there was a calculating mind, strategic calculating mind. And you never realized it until you realized it worked. He did it. He achieved it. And that's true of the Center for Palestine Studies. That's true for much of what we all did in the Middle East Institute. That's true with so much else that he did. I just wanted to recognize that for you, but also for this audience. Many of you were his students or his colleagues, and you probably know aspects of this. But I watched him, I mean, as somebody who had to deal with this institution, I learned an enormous amount from him, and I think we all owe him a great deal, more than we even realize. Thank you.
Hi, Brink. This is Terry Daltroy. I had no intention of saying anything today, but I just wanted to say thanks to Brink for a very odd reason. When he was chair of the department, he took a leave, and he asked me to stand in for him as chair, and I thought, what an extraordinary level of trust that showed, or venom, I'm not sure. But I received a tremendous education in how the university works from taking that position, from working with Brink, and watching him work with colleagues, with the administration. And I just wanted to call out here, we have four of his former students here who are Darksiders. That is students who came in together, Anand, Seema, Sophia, one other, who was it? In any event, those were students in sociocultural anthropology, took an interest in archaeology, which is what I am. And we talked to each other, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. And it was that kind of collegiality that Brink fostered across the different sectors of intellectual discourse in the department that I thought was one of the truly remarkable elements of his contribution to the department. So I just wanted to say thank you to him for that.
Hi, Brink.
Hi, Brink. So I also wasn't planning on saying anything, but I'm going to say a few things. One is about Brink's generosity. So as anybody in Anthro knows, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time as DGS. The first time I was a DGS, I wasn't tenured, but the reason was Brink was chair, DGS in Anthro, and DGS in MESAS, because no one else would do it. And so I was like, that's a little bit unreasonable. So I agreed to do it, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm not sure I was that much help, but Brink, your generosity was extraordinary. Optimism, which was mentioned. I, like Layla, have a very hard time being optimistic, shall we say. And the thing is, you know, like with CPS, for people, we don't have any money from the university, right? We have these big plans. It's like, how are we going to pay for it? And Brink was always, oh, we'll find the money. And I would panic. How are we possibly going to find the money? And he would find the money. So he really got us going by that kind of belief that we would pull it off. And the last thing I want to say is about your office, Brink. So everybody else talks about the rugs and the books and the window. I could not believe that Brink would sit at that desk next to a window that was wide open, that you could kind of fall out of if your chair rolled too far away from your desk. I was always terrified in your office, Brink, and so I sat on the couch very, very far from the window. Anyway, it's been incredible. It's been 20 years. I've been your colleague, and everything said today is absolutely spot on.
Hi, Brink. I'm also going to talk about the office in a moment. I'd like to thank Brink firstly for when my partner Zoe Crossland was appointed here in 2006. I kind of rashly gave up my job in the UK, tenured job, permanent job, and came here. And I went to see Brink, who was chair, and he said, "Well, what do you teach in the UK?" And I said, "Well, I teach these archaeology classes and social technology classes." And he said, "That's fine, just teach those here too." And he appointed me as an adjunct. And that was 19 years ago. And so I'm now a senior lecturer, director master's program in museum anthropology. So thank you for that, Brink. And then about 2018, Brink called me to his office, and I believe Rashid may have been there, and Leila also. And they asked me if I would like to take over as co-chair with Nadia of the Center for Palestine Studies. I believe Mona was also involved in that decision somehow. Rashid was taking a sort of back seat from CPS. So anyway, I've been co-director since then, and it's my favorite thing to do at Columbia. But not shortly after that, I think maybe 2019, just before COVID maybe, Brink, you called me to your office, and we were in the process of working out how Palestinian students could take advantage of the work that was being done at the Khalidi Library in Jerusalem. And I thought Brink was calling me to his office to discuss the logistics of how we might get that going. So I went to his office, and you took out your laptop, Brink. And I said, "Oh, do you want to talk about this Khalidi Library?" He said, "No, I want to talk about something much more important than that." Now, I don't know if everyone knows here, but Brink's son, Tyler, is a musician, a guitar player, and that's something we share. I'm not here to promote that at all, right? But buy my album now, right? But Brink, thank you, Simone. You took out your laptop, and the night before had been a big TV event at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and there was a tribute to George Harrison. Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, a whole bunch of musicians were there. And they played a version of George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Beatles song. And during that performance, the late Prince, well, he wasn't late then, he was, Prince came on stage and gave this extraordinary guitar solo, searing, soaring guitar solo, and then threw his guitar up in the air and walked off. And Brink wanted to know, he thought it was amazing. He said, "Do you think that's better than the original solo on the record?" Which was by Eric Clapton, actually. Brink clearly thought the Prince version was far superior, and I tend to agree, Brink. Anyway, thank you, Brink. Thank you for being a music lover. And he was always obsessed with trying to get Roger Waters to come and do something at CPS. And so I'll just finish with Roger Waters' words, Brink. "Wish you were here." Thank you.
Okay, gonna try not to lose it. Simone, hi Brink, hi Haley, hi Tyler. The way that I was first introduced to so many of you was through reading your work, Lila, Tim. And when I first got to Columbia, it was intimidating, frankly, to have to email you. And the person who gave me the courage to do that was Brink. For whatever reason, I was at meetings with the provost and pulled into lectures by Darrell Lee on the Balfour Declaration. And all of this was the kindness of Brink, and I think the unpretentiousness. So I just want to say I miss you. Thank you for giving me, sorry, so much courage, and I'll see you soon.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Brink. My name is Eliane van Daden. I'm an assistant professor in Mises. And when somewhere back in 2019 at a department event, I mentioned I didn't have a mentor yet. I didn't really know Brink yet. He offered to be my mentor, which he has been for the last 5 years. And he was very generous. I never had to ask him to meet because he would be first to invite me to come to his office, to come for lunch. Many of these mentorship sessions would involve me listening to his stories about Morocco and Yemen and looking at his carpets. But there was also some time to discuss my work. I remember one of the first meetings, he suggested my work on medieval Islamic medicine needed some more Marxist literary theory, which sent me into this rabbit hole, which took me 6 months to get out of. And luckily, I was able to leave it aside. But he was incredibly supportive, encouraging. Even when I used to go on my runs and they go past his home into Riverside Park, I somehow nearly always ran into Brink, and me and Short's red face, he would stop me and say, "How's your work going?" And so he was great. He made me feel very welcome. One of the last sessions we had, he thought it was very important we discussed my monograph title, and I had something in mind. I think I still want that title, but Brink said it was not a good title and I shouldn't go with it. So he disapproved me on that. I wasn't ready at all to lose Brink as a mentor. When he was preparing my 3rd year review, I heard he had to take medical leave. I mean, it's a really big loss to me, but I'm very, very grateful in the past years that he was there for me, and I will take his lessons, his warmth with me. Thank you so much, Brink.
Hi, everyone turn your mics off respectfully. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Brink's youngest, Bridget. This is incredibly surreal. I don't know if I've ever been so cold and sweaty all at once. I'm also quite fearful after going after so many intellectuals and speakers that I don't know if I know how to read anymore. So please bear with me. I kind of feel like a Nepo baby, and you all just really excelled at this, and I'm out of my depth a little bit. I just wanted to thank you all so much for coming. It really means the world to everyone to be getting together and celebrating my dad and his work. It's so overwhelming to be gathered here in his name. It's been so incredibly moving to hear about each of your relationships with him, what you've gleaned from working alongside him, and just hearing that, yes, he was that wonderful. He is that wonderful. And just to witness this immense outpouring of love through email and person has been really humbling and overwhelming and means so much to me. It goes without saying that his work and you all mean the world to him. I know that you are all so embraced by. I know that you all are what made and make his work so meaningful to him. His peers, students, and coworkers alike have always been his chosen family, and we've really had the privilege of all growing up together. Growing pains aside now, his supportive nature, warmth, and sense of humor continue to guide him. He still loves a good sweet, all the better if it's chocolate, and he still can't help but dance when he hears the right song. I hope this gathering today has been a cathartic space for everyone, though we might not really be able to do him and his work justice. He loves a party, so I hope we can still maintain that after this, we can all get together and kind of party and celebrate him and his work. Thank you all so much for coming.
Okay, so he knew my father long time ago, and I was about 10 years old or so, and
was the renter.
oh yeah. So Brink rented. Yeah, let's come together here. Okay, let me just do that so that they can see both of us. So Brink rented the house of my father, and he was working and in Ib, and he all the people of Ib that I know love him, and they always ask about him, and they even recently somebody told me that he wanted to to translate his book, The Calligraphic State. And so, I got a permission from Brink for that guy to translate his book. But at any case, like he, I was talking with him when I grew up, and then I was, telling him about my love for Sufism, and he gave me information that I didn't know, and since then I started developing this until later on when the United States of America granted Yemen 2 scholarships, and like about 500 people applied for the 2 scholarships, and I was one of them. But then, I knew that I didn't have any chances, and so I called Brink. In fact, I communicated with him through email, like he was here in Michigan, and I was like, he said, let me talk to we'll see, the committee of, and so when the committee chose the people for an interview, I was among the people. I knew it was Brink, and so we were 7 people to have the interview with the consulate. And then, there were like incredible people who were like artists, and I'm like, he advised me to bring my old manuscripts like from home and show the council, so that they know that we are working on this stuff. And so, but still, the result came like, I was number 4, I didn't have a chance. So I was sad, and like, but then I talked to Brink, and then Brink, didn't give up. And just he called the Mid East in Yemen and told them, can you please, like, could you make a stipend for this guy, and we will take care of him, like here in. They said, yeah, we still have some money. And so luckily, like, we rushed everything. It was like in September, and the school started, and I came like 5 days after. And then, things were incredible. But this, like, Brink is an amazing guy. Like, he's like, I mean, who else could do this, And not only that, while I was in Michigan, he was supporting me, like, reading my papers and
this is when you were in the NFA program.
In what? And you were, in that room. And I remember even one day when I came to your office, and Abdul Ali Uthman, who died, of course, was in your office. And then you told him, can you help this guy, like, in finding the sources of, of Sufism and all that? And then he said, yeah, there is one person in Yemen working on this, Ibn Alwan. And so, I like, because my intention was to make a PhD in Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, because I read so many things about him. I read the Ihya, I read so many other books. But then, Brink sent me to Knish, Professor Alexander Knish in Michigan, and then
who was great.
Who was great in his field, and he was Russian and knows, I don't know, 10 languages.
I remember when the first day he was in the classroom, he stood up to introduce himself. It's like everybody's melting away.
Yeah, and Knish told me, what are you going to do with Al-Ghazali? Like, so many people wrote about him. Like, do something, from Yemen. And I said, okay. I could do that. Like, maybe I write about this guy, but then there are no sources of Ahmad bin Alwan, like in English. There were few in medieval writing. But then I started doing this, and when this guy mentioned that there was somebody who was working on Ibn Alwan, I went to Yemen for a vacation. And I went to see this person and I told him, can you please, give me any, huh?
Can you please help me?
Yeah, can you please help me? Something like that. And then the guy said, yeah, these people don't care about this stuff. Why do you bother? And so I was disappointed. But then after 2 months before I came to the US again, I saw his book on Ibn Alwan in Sana'a, in Sana'a, in one of the bookstores. And so I took the book and it was amazing for me. Like it gave me, and so I work on that and until I graduated, and I'm still in contact with Brink after graduation. He's always helpful, and I wish him all the best. And thank you all for contributing to this, and with love. Even my father, when he was on his deathbed, I was not there, but they told me that don't forget that he sends his regards to Brink. And on his deathbed, I'm like, he remembers, and I was, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you. Hi, Brent.